Everybody, this is Dr. Flight. It's good to be with you. We're going to spend a little bit of time focusing our thoughts on the marketing plan. The marketing plan is a fairly significant document that drives much of the behavior and processes that we do in marketing, as you can imagine. And so it's like a business plan for the functional role of marketing. And in fact, much of the design of the plan itself follows an outline that you'd see to some degree in a business plan. It starts the planning process from a very broad perspective and then narrows to the functional level, and has evaluation and control, and it has a lot of strategic planning, strategic elements that chart the course for an organization. So we're going to talk just an outline of what the marketing plan looks like, and talk a little bit about some of its purposes and roles, and kind of what it's all about, and kind of what's there. So it explains present and future situations, and it's a forward-thinking document, just like a plan should be. It specifies specific outcomes, goals, and objectives. So it is very tactical from that perspective. It certainly will tie to those goals and objectives who's responsible for what. So key actions that are going to have to take place in order to be able to achieve those metrics that we want to hit are going to be there. It'll talk a little bit about what resources are needed, like what costs will be incurred, or what human capital is needed in order for the actions to take place, which will ultimately lead to those goals being moved forward. And then also, again, specifies this idea of monitoring and control. So with any plan, the goal is to implement the plan, and then understand whether the plan was successful or not based on whether it hit its goals or not. And oftentimes what happens is you get into the plan, you start executing the plan, and maybe situations like a crisis hits or something unexpected happens, and you have to deviate, and you have to manage through that process. So that requires monitoring. It requires observation in order to be able to do that. So as we build this marketing plan, or any plan, right, it needs to be comprehensive. It needs to be something that does not ignore obvious elements of the business process, of our customers, of whomever else is out there. Knowing though that there's going to be crises and things that come up, some type of band of acceptable flux is needed. So if we have to deviate and manage through our plan a little bit, that means we can't have it be too rigid. It have to be flexible enough to change as the business environment around us changes. We want to be consistent over time. So this marketing plan is something that it doesn't just get done and then put on the shelf. It gets done, it gets executed, it gets evaluated, and then a new plan is created after this one has run its course. So these are time-bound documents. So once it's done, then we repeat it. We want to be consistent over time. And we want to use consistent language, consistent ideas and concepts, themes throughout the document. We also would, as we get into this, want to be consistent in our strategy. Inconsistent strategies can happen, but that's not what we want. We want to be able to, for instance, price our product appropriately using a strategy that's supported by our distribution strategy. And things like that. So there has to be some consistency like that. And then finally, some logical approaches where, our plan needs to support and follow the organization's plan. And the organization's plan also has a mission statement and a purpose, and our plan has to support that mission and purpose as well. So those are kind of some of the things as we look at in consideration. And when we think about the structure of a plan, you can pause this video if you want to look at these 7 steps or 7 parts. But at the end of the day, this again will look very much like 2 things. 1, a business plan. And 2, like our marketing planning model or paradigm that we've looked at in the past. So if we pull that up and look at it just kind of quickly, we say, well, look, there's 3 parts to the planning model. There's organizational planning, strategic planning, and functional planning. And that's kind of the 3-step process that typically happens. And when we look at the progression of a marketing plan from beginning to end, we look at the very early stages of the organizational planning elements as executive summary, situational analysis, and things like internal strengths or weaknesses, opportunities, threats. We also can look at, like, again, distinctive capabilities, the things that we do well, identify what our resources are. And resources are things that we can leverage in the marketplace to gain a sustainable competitive advantage. So again, beginning of the planning process and the model would have these elements in it, followed by strategic planning, which would be within the function, like how are we going to grow, what are our markets going to be like, what type of market entry strategies will we have, how are we going to brand our product, what brand personality will we have. There are a lot of those questions that are asked, your CRM programming. There are all kinds of like ideas like this that build the product, the brand, the company from a strategic perspective in marketing. Again, it's done sort of in the middle, and then that follows that we would do implementation at the functional level when we're actually executing our pricing strategy, executing our distribution strategy, executing our media, our awareness, our promotional campaigns, those types of things. Okay, so again, kind of these go in order, and the key metrics that we're going to look at are going to happen at the functional level. They're also going to trickle up into that strategy space as well. Okay, so we'll just walk through each of these 7 steps. We won't go into enormous detail in each, but you should know these steps. You should know them in order, and this would be something that would be good to review, right? So, executive summaries. All documents start with an executive summary. It's going to be concise overview of the plan. Think of it as being a 1 or 2 pager that an executive can look at, almost a memo. You're probably going to have more in it than a memo would, but generally speaking, you want the highlights of what we're going to tell you, right? The bullet points. So this is not a deep dive. It's not a deep analysis. It's an overview. So give the major aspects of the plan, and then just kind of in a paragraph, the breadth of the plan, kind of talk about, generally speaking, we're talking about marketing, the time span that the plan covers. Again, it has to move along quickly, and you get input, and the plan may need to be approved at a couple different levels. So that would certainly be something to consider. Your plan will also be integrated into other functional areas in the firm. So, as we, again, build this executive summary, we don't want to think about too much depth, but you also think about where the place of the role of the function, role of marketing in the rest of the firm happens. At the end of the day, you're going to, in your plan, you're going to suggest, you're going to float ideas, you're going to propose a course of action moving forward. In order for the plan to be adopted, it has to be approved. So You're looking to, this is a cheerleader, this is a rah moment to kind of develop a plan, develop an enthusiasm for your plan, that it can be sold. So sell the plan in the executive summary, and talk about the highlights and the things that you're going to succeed with as a result of it. Okay, situational analysis. This is the second thing. So situational analyses, there are actually several models and ways and approaches to do a situational analysis, but this is the business situation. So the internal environment would include your strengths, weaknesses, kind of some of the elements that you perceive, organizational structure, culture, some of those types of things. Customer environment, the external environment, which is a big deal when we start talking about trends in regulations, technological shifts and disruptors are a big thing we want to look at. Those types of things go in there. And then finally, challenges. Issues that will cause barriers and implementation issues for your company that you can perceive. Now, the situational analysis, as I mentioned, there are several different models for this, and the situational analysis really bleeds into this third step, which is the SWOT analysis. If you were inclined to put these two, step 2 and step 3 together, it would be okay. That's not going to be a bad thing at all. Different business plans will have slightly different kind of steps. Some might include a hard third step that's called a SWOT analysis, as these authors do, and this is one version of a marketing plan. If you wanted to utilize a SWOT analysis in conjunction with your situational analysis, that would be appropriate as well. The problem or the challenge with this is we're going to shift a little bit at one point. When we use a SWOT analysis, it's supposed to be prescriptive and directives in the sense that when you identify strengths, that's an internal element which you build upon as a distinctive capability or a core competency. Okay, when you identify a threat or a weakness, another internal component, but it's something you need to address in action. So it's a little bit beyond situation. Situational elements are typically things that we have little control over. They're outside the firm, oftentimes. Not all the time, but oftentimes. And but when we shift to the SWOT analysis, this is a tool to do work, to plan and to strategize. So when you come away with the strengths, you actually have to do something with them once you have them. When you list your weaknesses, you have to do something with them knowing that they're there. So you have to build a plan around eliminating them or strengthening them so they're no longer a weakness. Moving to external elements of the SWOT, when we see an opportunity, it means that we're going to pursue it in some way. It doesn't just sit idle, in other words. This is not an exercise of running through the motions and then not using the tool. The SWOT analysis shifts our focus in the plan to actually say there are some things here we're gonna do and we're gonna work on and things like that. Bear with me as the screen just kind of did some funny things. We're gonna have to drop down here a little bit. There we go. All right, SWOT analysis is back. Okay, so think about that as that transition or pivotal point where you stop describing and you start analyzing as it affects you moving forward or your department moving forward as you go. Okay, step number 4. Now we're moving into strategy, marketing goals and objectives. Goals, broad, simple statements, okay, that can be accomplished. We have a goal of increasing customer satisfaction. We have a goal of increasing customer retention. We have a goal of being the number one market share or the number one choice for our consumers. When we shift to objectives, then we quantify these. So we want to improve satisfaction, and if our average satisfaction is a 7.1 on a 10-point scale, we want to increase it to 8. Okay, that's a quantitative improvement that we're stating that we will want to have, and if we do that, then it will meet the goal of improving customer satisfaction. We want to be we want to increase our market share by 4%, 5% this next time period. That will demonstrate quantitatively that we were more of a choice for customers than we were before. Right? So that's kind of the idea here. So we've got to assign what we want to do. We also have to assign metrics that will be attached to that so we can gauge and monitor our performance. So performance targets then help determine whether we've been successful or not. If we met that 5% market share growth, then we would deem that as a success. Right? So again, kind of consider what these objectives are, but think of them from a KPI standpoint, a key performance indicator. And are those things we already measure? Are those things that we're used to measuring and looking at for keys to success? And the last point here is actually a good one. Ensure that whatever those goals are, they align with the firm's mission. So, if part of the mission includes a social equity component, then we need to make sure we have some goals and calculable objectives that move us towards a social equity company in whatever way that's defined. Okay, so again, support the mission, support the purpose of the firm. Okay, marketing strategy. All right, so there's too many to list here. There's a few we'll talk about, but selection, identification of target markets. Those are customers we're going to serve, right? Creating and maintaining the marketing program. So there's a lot of strategy to think about, kind of like what we're going to do from a price, promotion, place or distribution type of perspective, and then product management piece. Are we going to add products? Are we going to try to invest in new market segments? Are we going to divest? Are we going to take some products away? That's a strategy, right? How can we manage our price? Are our customers price sensitive? Can we raise our price, lower our price? Can we become more competitive from a cost perspective, lowering our cost, which means we're more profitable? There's a million different strategies that we can talk about, but we need to identify kind of what's going to drive us and our business operations over the next time period. Okay, number 6, implementation, right? So what specific activities are we going to engage in order to implement strategy? When we implement that strategy, then we need to tie those into our metrics that we're measuring in order to be successful. So what activities specifically are we going to perform? How will they perform? When will they be performed? Who's going to do it? Who's responsible for getting these things done? What's the time frame of them? Are there some benchmarks along the way on the timeline? If we're executing these activities, what should we expect done at certain time points, right? Right. So the completion and monitoring then of these activities, and very, very, very importantly, we will not forget the idea that when we implement a plan, when we do something, there's a cost associated with doing that. When we decide to build awareness and we're going to launch a media campaign, there's a cost associated with that. When we decide to reach customers through a specific channel of retailers, creating that relationship with those retailers costs something. It's not free. It's not, without cost. So these are things that we need to plan out and think about in an execution, kind of state. When the plan is executed, how is that going to happen? Okay, and then the last step here, step 7, evaluation and control. So, we want to make sure that the plan is being engaged in, the activities are being completed. There's the doing of the plan, but there's also an evaluation of, is the plan being done and are the results successful, right? So we have a financial component, we have a cost component. There's, we monitor, we measure marketing's return on investment. So an investment is being placed in these activities. What's the return? What are we getting out of that? Is it what we expected? And how, and if it's not, how can that be improved? Something called a marketing audit. So certainly, kind of where did the money go? Is this where the money was meant to go? That's kind of what we want to do. And if not, can we revise our plans? Can we revise our expectations, or can we redeploy investments or dollars into something else that will achieve our goal if revisions are needed, if we're not able to complete what we're intending to do. Okay, so those are the 7 steps. Those are the 7 components. You can kind of see again where it starts from a broad perspective of the organization and then gets very, very functional after we get through the strategic part of that. We're not going to forget that the things that we do are data-driven. A lot of times, a lot of the processes and decisions we make are based on data that's gathered through market research or through some type of information system, right? And that we always are going to have a dashboard, and we're going to have key indicators that will tell us if we're doing the right thing or not. All part of evaluation and control. Right, so establishing performance measures and standards, assessing performance against those standards, and then taking corrective action are ultimately the things that we'll finally do. A couple other things we'll look at just quickly here. Crisis management. So with all plans, there are contingencies. Contingencies which are kicked in the case of some unexpected event. One of the challenges is we often know unexpected events are going to happen. We just don't know when. We don't know what they'll be sometimes, but we can sense that something might happen or will happen, and we need to be prepared for that. So being able to think about past events that have happened, learning from those past events, recalling how the company reacted and what we did to overcome obstacles from past events is something that will help through the next crisis that happens. Because there will be a next crisis. There's going to be something that will disrupt our behavior, disrupt our natural progression. So in marketing, what if we have a product recall? What happens then? What if in marketing we worried about competitors? What if a new competitor emerges that we never knew about, and all of a sudden, boom, they're there? What if, from a legal perspective, government officials pass a regulation that curtails a lot of our business? How are we going to adapt and overcome that? That'd be a big deal. What if one of our competitors goes out of business? This is kind of a reverse. We think of a crisis as kind of a bad thing, and probably rightfully so. But what if an opportunity springs up on us very rapidly? What would we do? In a contingency plan, we would need to know, like, what if this company, who's our chief rival, gets into serious financial trouble and threatens to go out of business? Can we capture their market share? Can we buy them? Can we push them into going out of business? Right? Can we put financial strain on them? If it looks like they're in financial trouble, can we lower our prices, putting, again, financial stress on that organization to get them to succumb? Right? So following up with a recovery plan, being able to come back with the plan that we'll be able to do. And trust me, there are all kinds of natural disasters. Not very many people probably had a worldwide pandemic on their contingency plans, except that, it happened, right? Economic shifts and changes happen enormously. Wars and conflict happen very, very quickly, and unexpectedly a lot of times. So being prepared for those types of things is something that is part of that planning process and should probably be abated with a good solid marketing plan or business plan that you are and have been creating. Okay, so let's step back a little bit. I'm going to talk about a couple more topics and then wrap this up. The plan itself has to be implemented or accepted and kind of pitched across the organization. So it's not just simply the marketing department doing this thing, getting it rubber stamped by some executive upstairs at the top level of the building or whatnot. It has to go through some channels of acceptance. Right, so certainly as you develop this plan, there's something called a bottom-up planning process, and there's also a budgeting process called the objective task budgeting process, where we start from the folks who are doing the work at the functional level. We talk to them about what they need in order to accomplish the goals that we have. And then we build from that point of perspective and move it up the chain through a series of approvals. So while the managers and the frontline employees are actively working the plan, the responsibility for the performance of the plan and where the KPIs are going to fall heaviest are going to be the mid-level strategists a lot of times. So VP of marketing or marketing directors within the organization. This may also fall on the chief marketing officer, but it could be those folks who lie just below that person in the hierarchy of the firm. The final approval has to come from the president or the CEO, who sees the big picture of all the different functional units and is able to integrate the marketing goal and plans with everything else that's happening. So will the plan support the overall mission of the organization? Will the plan support and work seamlessly with other functions within the organization as well? Those are kind of the key questions or the key thoughts that CEO or that leader is going to be expected to think about. The last thing that we'll talk about here is something called internal marketing. Internal marketing is a real thing. It happens where we have our sort of agenda, if you will, that we want to move forward with. It's reflected in our marketing plan. But again, we still have to sell this plan across the rest of the organization. And plans don't get accepted right away. Plans are pushed back upon, especially if you're talking budget items where budget's going to go to this project that marketing is spearheading, and well, they're just spending more money. We could use that money to do something else. Okay, I get that. And there's resistance. So, like anything, you have to create this, motivation. Like, hey, look, I get that this is going to cost money, but here are the benefits and here are the outcomes that we're going to achieve by doing it. And so you have to work through the system, work through the internal, kind of checkpoints to get approval across the organization for new projects, which may be reflected in your business plan or marketing plan. So if you think about when a plan fails to get accepted across other functions in the organization, it may be resistance to risk. Look, this new product you're talking about, there's risk that it'll fail. If it fails, we'll lose X amount of money. Inability to measure innovation impact. So you're going to do something new. We're going to maybe create a new product. We're going to do a new process. We're going to look for a new market. We're going to do a new ad campaign. How do I measure the economic performance as a result of that innovation, that new thing that we're doing? Can you tie the dollars for dollars on that marketing return on investment? Many times that's difficult. Many times it's not very clear, and a lot of people will poke holes in the validity of those measures when you say, yeah, we project or forecast X amount of revenue for this amount of investment. Again, those are very difficult to actually kind of quantify in a real way, but that, and people will reject that. Limited human resources. So if we're going to implement this plan, do we have the people to do it? That's a good reason to push back, right? Limited technology support, or R&D. We don't have the R&D to do that. We need an R&D budget. We're 5 years away from that breakthrough, kind of product or whatever. We're not ready for that. Limited or lacking of budget, lacking of innovation culture. So, you get across the firm, oh, we've never done that before. We've never done this new thing. We've never done that. There's too much risk involved. I just don't think we should do that. Okay, or a lack or insufficiency of leadership or vision or strategic focus. So this could happen where you have an entrenched leader who hasn't ever changed, hasn't ever done anything different, and that's, of course, going to create problems and barriers when you want to do something new in your plan. Okay, so this is a little bit of a better conversation to have, or a bigger conversation to have, because creating the plan can be perfunctory. It can be kind of the step-by-step thing where all the pieces fall into place. Okay, we've got 7 steps. We have last year's plan. We're going to update it. We're going to do a few new things. We're going to update the data, and then we're going to report it. But what if it doesn't get accepted? What if it doesn't get internal? What if you try to do too much before the rest of the organization's ready for this much change? All right, so these are some questions that obviously are more of a not nuanced thing that organizational managers are going to want to think about. Okay, so this video, this lecture here, we've talked about what the marketing plan's all about, what the marketing plan should look like, kind of the structure of it, but then also some organizational issues associated with planning as well. Let me know if you have any questions, and thanks for tuning in.